There comes a moment in every life when the world tests not our strength, but our character. It is easy to stand tall when we are praised, when doors are open, and when justice appears to be on our side. But the true measure of a human being is revealed in the quiet, painful moments, when we are wounded, misunderstood, or treated unfairly. In those moments, the question is not what has been done to us, but what we will allow ourselves to become. I have learned that freedom is not merely the removal of chains from our wrists, it is the discipline to live with respect for the dignity of others, even when our own dignity has been challenged. Many believe maturity comes with age, with titles, or with power. But emotional maturity is something far rarer. It is not found in loud voices or raised fists. It is found in calm hearts that refuse to surrender their values to anger. Each of us carries pain, some visible, some hidden deep within the soul. Yet pain, when left unchecked, can turn into bitterness, and bitterness can imprison us more tightly than any cell ever could. Emotionally mature people understand one profound truth. They do not allow their pain to write their principles. They know that if they let hurt dictate their actions, they hand their future to their wounds. In a divided world where reaction is often celebrated more than reflection, choosing restraint becomes an act of courage. It is easy to react. It is far more difficult and far more powerful to pause, to think, and to respond with wisdom. This is not weakness. This is leadership. This is the strength that builds nations, heals communities, and restores humanity. Today, I do not speak to you about perfection. I speak to you about choice. The choice to rise above impulse. The choice to govern your inner world before attempting to change the outer one. And the choice to follow one rule that defines emotional maturity. A rule that, when practiced, turns ordinary people into pillars of dignity, resilience, and quiet, unshakable power. There is a quiet danger that walks beside every human being, especially in moments of hardship. It is the danger of allowing pain to become our teacher instead of our test. Pain can educate us, yes, but when it is given authority over our principles, it begins to shape us into something we were never meant to be. Emotionally mature people understand this deeply. They know that suffering is not permission to abandon character, and injustice is not an invitation to lose one's humanity. When we are hurt, the world often whispers a tempting lie. You are justified to become cruel because you were treated unfairly. Yet history has shown us again and again that cruelty does not heal wounds, it multiplies them. The mature heart refuses this lie. It understands that principles are not ornaments to be worn in times of comfort and discarded in times of pain. They are anchors designed precisely for the storms. There will be moments when anger feels righteous, when bitterness feels deserved, and when revenge appears reasonable. In those moments, emotionally mature people pause and ask themselves a difficult question. If I surrender my values today, what kind of person will I wake up as tomorrow? They understand that pain is temporary, but the consequences of compromised principles can last a lifetime. Pain has the power to shrink the soul if we allow it. It can turn compassion into suspicion, courage into fear, and hope into resentment. But it also holds another possibility. When met with maturity, pain can refine us. It can teach patience without hardening the heart, strength without arrogance, and wisdom without hatred. The difference lies not in the pain itself, but in who we decide to be while carrying it. Emotionally mature people refuse to become smaller because of what they have endured. They do not allow betrayal to turn them into betrayers, nor injustice to turn them into oppressors. They understand that to lose one's principles in response to pain is to hand victory to the very forces that caused the suffering. True victory is not found in retaliation, but in remaining whole. This does not mean ignoring pain or pretending wounds do not exist. It means facing pain honestly, without allowing it to dictate behavior. It means choosing dignity over impulse and purpose over bitterness. Such choices are not easy. They require inner discipline, self-awareness, and a long vision that looks beyond the present hurt. The emotionally mature person knows that principles are most powerful when they are tested. Anyone can be kind when life is generous. Anyone can speak of justice when it benefits them. But to stand by one's values when doing so is costly. That is where maturity reveals itself. That is where character is forged. In the end, pain asks us a single question: will you let me change your values, or will you let me strengthen them? Emotionally mature people answer with their actions. They choose to rise, not harden. They choose to remain human in an inhuman moment, and by doing so, they protect the one thing no suffering should ever be allowed to take away: the integrity of the soul. There is a powerful truth that every emotionally mature person comes to understand, often through struggle and reflection. While we may not choose the circumstances that confront us, we always choose the spirit with which we meet them. The world is full of forces beyond our control. Other people's actions, their words, their failures, and sometimes their cruelty. To live with maturity is to recognize this reality without surrendering responsibility for our own inner life. It is tempting, especially in moments of difficulty, to believe that our emotions are caused entirely by others. We say, "I am angry because they provoked me," or "I am bitter because they wronged me." Yet this belief quietly removes our power. When we place the control of our emotions into the hands of others, we make ourselves prisoners of their behavior. Emotionally mature people refuse this imprisonment. They understand that while others may knock on the door of their hearts, only they decide who is allowed to enter and who is not. Accepting responsibility for one's inner world is not an act of denial, it is an act of courage. It requires us to look inward instead of outward, to ask not only what happened to me, but how will I respond to what happened to me? This question transforms suffering into agency. It reminds us that dignity is not granted by circumstances, but cultivated by choice. Blame offers temporary comfort, but it demands a heavy price. When we blame others for our emotional state, we surrender growth. We remain stuck, waiting for the world to change before we can find peace. Emotionally mature people understand that peace does not wait for permission from the outside. It begins the moment we decide to take responsibility for our thoughts, our reactions, and our conduct. This responsibility does not mean suppressing emotion or pretending pain does not exist. On the contrary, it requires honest acknowledgement of fear, anger, and disappointment. But it also requires discipline, the discipline to prevent these emotions from ruling our actions. There is a great difference between feeling anger and being governed by it. The mature art feels deeply, yet chooses wisely. When we govern our inner world, we reclaim our freedom. Even in confinement, even under injustice, the human spirit can remain unconquered if it refuses to surrender its inner authority. History has taught us that chains placed on the body are painful, but chains placed on the mind are far more destructive. Emotional maturity breaks those inner chains. To accept responsibility for one's inner world is to say, "I will not allow hatred to define me, even if hatred is directed at me." It is to say, "I will not allow bitterness to speak louder than my conscience." Such responsibility is not weakness, it is moral strength. It is the strength that allows a person to stand firm without becoming rigid, to be compassionate without becoming naive, and to be resilient without becoming hardened. In the end, Emotionally mature people understand this simple yet demanding truth. We may not control the wind, but we can always adjust our sails. By taking responsibility for our inner world, we move through life not as victims of circumstance, but as stewards of our own character. And in that stewardship, we find our deepest freedom. There is a quiet discipline practiced by emotionally mature people, one that is rarely applauded yet deeply transformative. It is the discipline of self-governance. They come to understand that while the world will always present reasons to feel angry, afraid, or discouraged, none of these emotions are commands. They are signals, not rulers. To accept responsibility for one's inner world is to recognize this distinction and to live by it. Many people spend their lives negotiating with the outside world, believing that peace will arrive once others change their behavior, their words, their attitudes. Emotionally mature people take a different path. They understand that waiting for others to change is a fragile strategy for our happiness. Instead, they turn inward and take ownership of the only territory they truly control: their thoughts, their emotions, and their actions. This responsibility demands honesty. It requires admitting when pride disguises itself as principle, when fear pretends to be caution, and when anger claims to be justice. Such self-examination is uncomfortable, yet it is necessary. Without it, we become strangers to ourselves, reacting rather than choosing, drifting rather than leading our own lives. When we refuse responsibility for our inner world, we hand our power to circumstance. A harsh word can ruin our day. An unfair act can harden our heart. A disappointment can convince us to abandon hope. Emotionally mature people resist this surrender. They acknowledge the pain of these experiences, but they refuse to let them dictate who they become. They understand that emotional freedom is not the absence of adversity, but the ability to remain centered within it. Accountability replaces blame in the mature mind. Blame asks, who caused this feeling? Accountability asks, what will I do with this feeling? This shift is subtle, yet profound. It moves us from victimhood to agency, from helplessness to strength. It allows us to respond with intention rather than impulse, and with wisdom rather than regret. There is a misconception that taking responsibility for one's emotions means carrying the burden alone. In truth, it creates healthier connections. When we own our inner world, we communicate more clearly, listen more deeply, and forgive more genuinely. We stop demanding that others manage our feelings and start showing up as whole, grounded human beings. This responsibility also nurtures resilience. Life will disappoint us. People will fail us. Dreams will sometimes break. Emotionally mature people do not deny these realities, but they do not allow them to define their inner climate. They learn to endure hardship without surrendering hope, to face injustice without losing compassion, and to confront failure without losing self-respect. To govern one's inner world is to practice leadership at the most personal level. It is leadership without an audience, discipline without applause, and courage without spectacle. It is the choice to act in alignment with values, even when emotions pull in the opposite direction. In the end, emotionally mature people understand that the greatest freedom a person can achieve is not freedom from struggle, but freedom within it. By accepting responsibility for their inner world, they ensure that no matter how turbulent the outer world becomes, their character remains steady, their conscience remains clear, and their humanity remains intact. There is a strength greater than shouting, and a power far deeper than judgment. It is the strength to listen and the power to understand. Emotionally mature people learn that before they pass judgment on another human being, they must first seek to understand the story that shaped them. This is not an easy path, but it is the path that leads to wisdom, reconciliation, and lasting change. In moments of disagreement, our first instinct is often to defend, to argue, to prove ourselves right. The ego finds comfort in certainty, yet certainty without understanding builds walls, not bridges. Emotionally mature people recognize that every person speaks from a place of experience, of fear, of hope, of pain, or of belief. To listen is not to agree, but to acknowledge the humanity behind the words. Judgment is quick. It requires little effort and even less courage. Understanding, however, demands patience. It asks us to quiet our own voice long enough to truly hear another. It asks us to admit that our perspective, no matter how sincere, is never complete. This humility, not weakness. It is the beginning of wisdom. When we judge too quickly, we reduce people to a single moment, a single mistake, or a single opinion. Emotionally mature people resist this reduction. They understand that no human being is defined by one chapter alone. They remember that they too have been misunderstood, mislabeled, or judged unfairly, and they choose not to repeat that injustice. Seeking understanding does not mean excusing harmful behavior or abandoning principles. It means responding with clarity rather than cruelty, and with firmness rather than hatred. It allows us to challenge ideas without dehumanizing people. In this way, understanding becomes a force that corrects without destroying. In a divided world, empathy becomes a quiet act of resistance. To listen when others shout, to seek common ground when others dig trenches, is an act of courage. Emotionally mature people understand that anger may feel powerful in the moment, but it rarely builds anything that lasts. Understanding, on the other hand, has the power to transform conflict into dialogue and enemies into fellow human beings. There is also a freedom that comes with understanding. When we stop judging hastily, we free ourselves from the burden of bitterness. We stop carrying the weight of resentment and begin to carry the responsibility of wisdom. This does not make life easier, but it makes it richer and more meaningful. Emotionally mature people know that listening deeply does not weaken their position, it strengthens it. When they speak, they do so with insight, not assumption. When they act, they do so with awareness, not impulse. Their words carry weight because they are rooted in understanding, not reaction. In the end, seeking understanding before judgment is a choice to see humanity before difference. It is the choice to believe that peace is not born from silencing others, but from hearing them. And it is this choice that allows emotionally mature people to rise above division, remain grounded in dignity, and lead with a wisdom that does not shout, but endures. There comes a time in every life when a person must decide what will lead them forward, the hunger of the ego or the call of purpose. Ego speaks loudly. It demands recognition, victory, and the satisfaction of being right. Purpose, however, speaks in a quieter voice. It asks a deeper question. What serves the greater good, even if it costs me personally? Emotionally mature people learn to listen to that quieter voice. The ego is easily wounded. It reacts swiftly to insult and seeks validation in applause and dominance. When guided by ego, decisions are shaped by pride, revenge, and the desire to prove superiority. Such decisions may feel powerful in the moment, but they rarely build anything that lasts. They divide where unity is needed and destroy where healing is possible. Emotionally mature people understand that a life led by ego is a restless life, forever chasing approval and forever threatened by disagreement. Purpose, on the other hand, provides direction beyond the self. It connects personal action to collective progress. When a person acts from purpose, they ask not, how does this make me look? But how does this help others rise? This shift transforms leadership into service and strength into responsibility. It allows a person to endure criticism without bitterness and success without arrogance. Acting from purpose requires sacrifice. It may require restraint when retaliation feels justified, silence when recognition is tempting, and patience when progress is slow. Emotionally mature people accept these sacrifices because they understand that the goal is not personal triumph, but meaningful change. They know that history remembers not those who shouted the loudest, but those who stood firm for what was right when it was difficult to do so. Purpose also provides clarity in moments of conflict. When emotions run high, the ego urges immediate reaction. Purpose urges reflection. It asks whether an action will deepen division or move people closer to justice and peace. Emotionally mature people do not confuse reaction with courage. They know that true courage is often calm, deliberate, and guided by long-term vision rather than short-term satisfaction. There is a humility that accompanies purpose. It allows a person to admit mistakes, to learn, and to grow. Ego resists such humility, fearing it as weakness. Yet emotionally mature people understand that humility strengthens credibility and trust. When people see actions guided by purpose rather than self-interest, they find inspiration rather than resentment. Acting from purpose also protects the soul. Ego-driven lives are constantly at war, competing, comparing, and defending. Purpose-driven lives, though not free from struggle, are anchored. They draw strength from meaning rather than applause. This anchoring enables emotionally mature people to remain steady through both praise and criticism, success and failure. In the end, emotionally mature people understand that the greatest victories are not personal. They are the victories of justice over hatred, unity over division, and hope over despair. By acting from purpose rather than ego, they ensure that their lives contribute not merely to their own advancement, but to the dignity and progress of humanity itself.